grounding ourselves. The sun is shining through my window here, and I have the distinct pleasure of talking with the lovely Alexis Rose. Hello, Alexis.
Hello, nice to be here today. I'm glad you're getting some sun, even though you're a little chilly up there.
Yeah, there's always a silver lining, right?
Yes, I'm glad it's a busy space area today, a little extra special. So I think this is going to be a fun conversation.
Wow, that's awesome. I would love to hear a little more about what you mean by that. I was just looking at that space weather app, and it seems like we're maybe a little below average today, which is um, chill, I suppose,
For now,
for now. Yeah, I don't know. We'll see. Okay, so for those of you who do not know, Alexis is she's a space weather researcher. I kind of like the word exo-cosmologist, but maybe you don't like that term. But
I'm into it. I
okay.
love words. I'm going to write that down.
And she's also a psychic medium therapist, which I think is fascinating, and we'll get into some of that. Um, we'll also talk a little bit about the Schumann resonance. So first, I want to start a little bit just about your background, Alexis. I want to hear about how you got into this, your initial spiritual experiences. What do your friends and family think about what you're doing, and how do you deal with that?
That's a good question. Not everyone weaves in the how do your friends and family feel about what you do, but I think they've lost the ability to comprehend what I'm doing. I think it got to that point where, and with a lot of my friends, it's the same way, even people I talk to every single day, I move past their point of understanding in this topic of research. But that happens pretty much, I think, to every scientist who really gets into it after a few years. When you start getting into the discovery phase and theoretic moving into your theoretical like areas of your own study, it's really just an explorative motion. So I'm just telling them what I notice and what I'm starting to think is happening. And truly what I'm starting to perceive, I think is happening is beyond what most people would consider science as well. So it's hard for them to connect to me as much because they wanted me to go into the sciences. I was encouraged by my entire family to go into university to do a psychology degree with my choice. And I couldn't get into the science uh, program. I had to do the arts version, but it's the same program with one less like chemistry class or something dumb like that. But I got to see the arts side of university a little more. They also had more therapeutics and educational therapeutic sort of options for the students. So that was cool. Instead of going into more of testing on animals and doing more testing on physical things, which I was not interested in doing. The experience in university was, most of us realize, it was in its own form, basically trying to steal the souls of the youth and exhausting them and telling them they're not good enough basically the whole time and lying to them the whole time. Anyway, and then having them poison themselves with drugs and alcohol and, all of this really terrible behavior in this terrible environment for growth of people. And I came back after my awakening to try and get more education. It just was ridiculous because I was watching demons roaming the campus. It was already so obvious how horrible the conditions spiritually that these educational facilities have. And
Do you want to say
after,
where you went to university?
yeah, I went to University of Alberta, which is one of basically
That
the biggest in Western Canada.
okay.
And it one of the biggest, most northern, I would say, probably universities, and one of the best. I was born at the hospital there as well. So it was like this big full circle karmic sort of thing. I was walking the campus like it was my mission. It was insane when I was there, how many kilometers I did running and doing and grid working that whole part of the city.
Wow.
And now I continue to do that work, especially at buildings like universities and those kinds of structures. They're similar they're similar, I want to say, source, and their similar energy seems to be a root of what we're trying to kind of remove. It's sort of the parasitic issue, I would say, on the soul of our planet, even what has been happening in buildings that look like that and around those buildings these days, including like citadels and churches as well, like similar issue. And with my education in psychology, promptly I learned about, I think it was Dr. Joe Dispenza was one of my influences, as well as potentially like Greg Braden and maybe Graham Hancock or a few of those other authors. And they're sort of like this edge of disclosure that I used to understand was cutting edge, which is I now know is not the case. But anyways, I learned about the sun. I learned about the earth, the electromagnetic energy between them having any sort of impact on each other that could influence our brainwaves. And as soon as I heard that, I was stunned. I was stunned and angry and very, very concerned, because basically we're educating people and they think that they know things, doctors, all of these people, and they aren't even considering anything to do with any of the solar activity to have any effect on your biology at any time. It's never comes up in the diagnostics, they're not unfortunately, which I assume is going to have to become the case if the sun is becoming more active. People are waking up to this, and I feel like probably just on a bit of a leading edge of that waking up. I'm not the first one to know about this, but I think I took it into my own hands in a new way using social media and popularizing like the hashtag Schumann resonances when I was studying that. And now I do space weather, or solar flares is a big one, because truly, well, all the study has really come down to solar flares is one of the biggest landmarks. And I think one of the most interesting things that if you take anything from this interview would be to immediately start tracking the solar flares immediately. And you will have so much more coherency in your life and your rhythms and your moods and so on. Because as a therapist, I just wanted to help people feel better, because I could tell the chaos was unbearable being around most people. And I could tell they were in pain, and I could tell there was something wrong, but sometimes I couldn't tell what it was. And now, for the most part, I know exactly what the problem is, almost always. So I've become a very effective doctor as well, but in the new world, not the old.
Right. So, that's fascinating. Can you talk a little bit about the kind of grid work that you would do when you were at university, or even the kinds of things you do now? And could you maybe bring that into your spiritual awakening experience and sort of what got you into doing the grid work in the first place?
I am trying to remember where I potentially learned about the grid work before, but I always had this overwhelming sense, in certain locations that all of a sudden I felt way more conscious. I felt way more engaged in the present moment, way more lucid, as if we are dreaming awake, and then there's more lucid moments. I can track these lucid moments now with the space weather also, and when they're going to come in more for us globally, so we don't have to do the work. The environment's doing it to us, so that's cool. But I would become more conscious, more lucid in these moments where I was at these buildings, and I would find myself looking at even just the finest grains of the walls and into every corner. And mentally, I was very good at laying out floor plans in my mind, and I have very hard for me to get lost. I just seem to have this ability to navigate and I would walk these buildings and I would search through them and look into the eyes of the people on the paintings and who worked there. And I would get so much information, and I would feel so much also the darkness as well that they were hiding, where in the buildings they didn't want people, where they were directing people away from. And I would be more curious as to that area, of course, but
Wow.
also know my limits. And I did have a mild Christian upbringing, so I was aware of angels as well by when I was younger, and I felt as though the angels were looking out for me all my life, and that I had God's guiding hand in my life. I did feel that way because I would get punished also right away if I ever did something that I knew was wrong. It was like an instant slap back. And I didn't notice that was always the case for people, because they kept doing terrible things and nothing terrible seemed to happen to them. And I was always confused. But I began to just take more seriously the that sort of
Instant
morality.
karma almost.
Yeah, it was very strict morality. I felt like I was being held to very high standards as a person. And learning more about the grid work, I think really broke through was early 2000s when I began waking up to ancient sites. Like the History Channel was kind of talking more about ancient aliens around that time. And that was becoming a major popular thing. And how these sites had all of these stories and issues and lies. And going to these sites in Europe when I was in university just for fun, I just kept finding myself looking for the darkness and looking for these ancient towers and places, the oldest pieces I could find, and engaging with them in some way, physically touching them, just observing them so intensely. Just almost like I want to say almost like an obsessed feeling, like I was just suddenly obsessed with some building or some direction I had to walk, and I would end up in some place and I knew that was it, and I would spend my time there and just stare at stuff. And now you can do more things, like I do mantras or chanting sometimes when I need to lift the vibration somewhere, because now I know how to act upon a space more so as I've aged, instead of just observing it and being kind of like a satellite camera or something. And now it's more like, okay, I'm going to chant something beautiful here or sing in this place and bring the light and ask the angels to join me and show me if there's anything I need to do to be of service for create uplifting humanity, for correcting the grids, and basically just making the earth a more lovely place. But the grid work now, I realize, is more of the electromagnetic lines over the earth, and that our earth has a natural grid, but it was also used and abused by, somehow I would assume, some sort of magnetic ability of these buildings to kind of pull these latitudinal, all these grids, and kind of magnetically pull and warp spaces and open holes in a way of all the magnetic lines, and cause this flow of energy to be unnatural. So certain areas would become extremely poverse all of a sudden, because the energy of the earth wasn't running through that line. It was getting pulled to this citadel or something. And then this whole area suffered, and they weren't getting good weather. They weren't getting any, crops. Like, it's everything all of a sudden is a problem. And getting a lot of visions the last few years that we're correcting that all those buildings and all the really nasty things are getting burned down, broken down. Something is changing at those locations, and then some other random amazing or non-amazing thing will happen in the same area around the same time. I've
Yeah,
noticed.
real quick, sorry. Something
Go on.
something that I've also noticed is along the lines of what you're saying is those buildings kind of create the culture in their environment sometimes. Like uh, we don't necessarily have to say what the organizations are because we know, but if you look at the older ones, the buildings in that area kind of mimic that style. And even in my neighborhood here, the closer you get to one of these temples, a little bit, it just, you can tell there's sort of because right across the alley there's a recovery center. So there's a battle going on just right there. There's a lot of
Classic.
good souls here in Nebraska, and there's National Guard Center right across the street. And,
Oh,
so yeah, but exactly what you're saying. I love how you were talking about participating in your environment and not necessarily just observing because that can kind of maybe parasitize you in a way. So if you're doing chants and mantras, you can actually heal that area and maybe fix some of those space warps.
yeah,
Um,
it
so
helps.
have you ever had, so you kind of mentioned a spiritual awakening. Do you want
Yeah.
to talk a little bit about your spiritual awakening?
I think it is about a heartbreak. It's about questioning something so awful, usually, that you question your faith in the way that the universe works. And that's kind of the spiritual awakening, I think. And most of the time it is some sort of tragic event that seems to knock someone to their awakening. Because again, that it's like the dream, the bubble has been popped. The dream you thought was being run by something else is now all of a sudden, you know, hurting you and causing you to do something, causing you to act, causing you to wake up and sober up to a situation you thought was one way, but it's actually not. And we had, my grandmother was given a chronic, or what was it, a terminal, she was told she was terminally ill and that she was going to die of cancer. And when they told me that, it's like even the adults knew telling me was going to upset me so much, but they had to tell me. It was this, as I'm the eldest child of the family, it was sort of my duty kind of to shoulder that. And I was like, okay, so they told me I was like terminally ill. They're like, yes, so basically there's nothing they can do. And she's on the trajectory of death, like right now. And I was just like, great. That is the least helpful thing I have ever heard in my life. It's ridiculous. And even as a child, it just broke me open, just being like, what is going on? Like, this is absolutely unacceptable. And my family even began opening up, because usually when someone is close to death, that's what happens, is the spirit world becomes more apparent. The veil starts to drop. People start remembering their spiritual sides. They start remembering these spiritual truths as a way to cope. And it's always there for us. But I think it's like you need to have your heart cracked open in a way, or your ego even broken open, being your world just kind of has to shatter in some way. And then the spiritual journey is you rebuilding yourself instead of being built when you were built as a child by the system and by your family. Your spiritual awakening is when you begin building yourself, in my opinion, and reparenting yourself and realizing your generational impact. And yeah, this terminal illness, she lasted with multiple experimental treatments from the Western medical side for like another 3 years, which is crazy. She almost bled out one of the days that I was having like one of my graduations or something in high school. It was a terrible day. And it was all these moments of horrible. And then like, she's not dead yet. Like, it's so weird, and this back and forth. And she had such an interesting attitude about it and introduced me to people who died on the operating table and came back, and the stories they would tell. And then they began introducing me to psychic mediums as well. And I didn't know about these things, and I had to know because it was giving me that understanding. Okay, what's going to happen to her when she dies? Because I didn't really know, even in my religious upbringing, whatever they gave us, it was like, well, God's taking care of it. So, but it wasn't enough at that age. It wasn't enough. My analytical mind wanted to know way
Definitely.
more. Yeah, and wanted to know way more of the process of, the mechanics of it, if it was a deal. And I learned about DMT also, I think around that time. I didn't take any, but I learned about it as well, because that was a part of the dying process. And they would say that these visions of heaven that people would experience was caused by the release of DMT in the mind. And it was just your own brain, in a way, creating this for you until you just eventually stop creating any sensation. And then there was this atheistic sort of approach to death that a lot of people were really engaged in at that time. It felt like, now I think spirituality is growing in popularity, but this understanding of there's either nothing or everything, it was very difficult. So I began to walk down that path, asking all the questions I could, figuring it out. And my grandmother eventually did pass away. She eventually did subdue to her illness. And they had a spiritual experience about that, like seeing basically a person standing behind her in her hospital bed, trying to lift her soul, like trying to get her out of this horrible condition, again, where she's being kept alive on machinery. Another thing spiritually I would never do to a person again. It's not a good idea. I've learned so much, but yeah, after she passed away, I began practicing and trying to contact her with my third eye, basically. And I read a book from a psychic medium about how she did her process and how she just meditate basically and relax and ask to engage and see what she would see. And I saw my first vision that day, and it was well, amazing. And I saw a whole bunch of dogs running at me, which was amazing because that's where my grandmother would have been. She was a dog breeder. So it's just like dogs running at me. My eyes are open and I can see almost like dogs just running at me as well. It's like another layer of movie screen, or like another layer of stuff that's going on that I could just all of a sudden see it. I gave my body permission to see it. And the clearing out the third eye became a huge part of the physical thing I could do to help me reconnect to my family, not lose track of my loved ones when they die in a way too. So that was really nice. So clearing out the pineal gland is another huge thing I did. Would recommend for everybody. It's amazing to have way more perceptive abilities, like just to be able to perceive more. It makes you feel more connected to everything and less lonely and less desperate to figure out an answer, I've noticed. So I've been liberated through the process, empowered. I no longer give my power away to other people because I also don't even feel like this life is as real as some people think it is. I've moved beyond that sort of barrier as well. I do fear dying still. Part of me is like, oh, it kind of freaks me out sometimes, but I've gotten to a point now where I'm like, I get it. It's not for me right now, but I understand. And I'm here to help people also who have recently lost loved ones and so on. And it's my pleasure to now literally be able to perceive them with my eyes open, like walking into my vision as if they're also there in some other layer of reality that we can't perceive normally, and show me things. They show me things. They will gesture. They will touch me. I will feel their emotions. I can talk to a person's masculine side, like their paternal line, and then I can turn in my left and talk to their maternal line. And it seems like I've been able to figure out how to communicate and get really cool messages across. And a lot of people regret when they die, in a way, not having some sort of better system set up with their living relatives to talk to them and to engage with them, because they're right here. A lot of them, they don't go anywhere. They actually didn't make it. And so they have to keep learning here, but they're out of their bodies. Some of these people do go to other places and their soul goes off to somewhere. I've felt someone's parents' souls be literally in the Pleiadian star system. I've felt like their soul just went whoosh and shot like right back to the star, as if they were like a boomerang and they were just bouncing back home. And that doesn't always happen, but I get these perceptions sometimes that are even beyond what some people are comfortable talking about, even with a medium. So it's
Sure.
been tricky, but the aliens galactic stuff had to come in at the same time as the spiritual earthly stuff, and they've all just kind of walked together forward. And so has our society. Thankfully, I didn't alienate myself. Honestly, I feel silly almost. Seems like everyone now a medium who can do card readings and talk to aliens. It's very funny. So I don't feel that different. But I do like to push. I like to push the community and push the limit a little bit, as I was really online, one of the first people, even on Instagram, doing this kind of stuff. And then it just exploded, and I was getting attacked and silenced, and everything got more complicated. The war on people, that was all this beautiful budding people that was happening on social media, it all just got like attacked with, as if they were like spraying for weeds or something. It was just like they just killed off so much of the vibe, these technologies. And it was good for the case to kind of push people back into a more organic spiritual awakening, who are relying on maybe social media too much. And it pushed them into more of, it was maybe their heartbreak moment when they got kicked off of social media for speaking their truth or sharing something extreme that they experienced with their community. And there's so many ways people are waking up even today, like the elections, that they still wake people up. It still break their hearts open to the point where they're like, I'm done. I'm done waiting for something else to turn out for me. I'm going to start doing what I need to do to make myself happy and feel accomplished in a lifetime. If you do make it to your old age, what are you going to tell the kids running around for fun stories? Like, what are you going to write in your autobiography? Is it going to be interesting? Would you read it? And that's sort of the message I get a lot, again, from people who've passed on, is don't stop doing what makes you fun and unique, because that's what you're supposed to try and do and continue doing here, and hold that frequency, and don't give in to fear, and don't give in to religions. A lot of them gave into religious beliefs, like Catholics. I've met a couple dead Catholics who are weirded out by me. They're still scared of me even though they're dead. They're amongst the spirit world, and they're not sure if I can even see or perceive them, because they still don't have that embodiment, that connection. It's so weird, but it's true. And I've had to prove a ghost that I could talk to it and its family once or twice before. Just genuinely didn't believe what I was doing was possible. So that's been fun also. My family believes I can do what I do, mostly my most nuclear family, because my mother also has abilities. And so she was kind of the one being like, you can do. I was like, well, she can do it, I can do it. She didn't
Wow.
even want her powers, and she does now a little, but she's very scared. She's in a different,
It can be
that
overwhelming for
it
sure.
is. I'm assuming hers may even be more potent than mine. So maybe she never engaged the same way. But I was a slow and steady learner, and I've been able to channel these energies through my body on a steady increasing rate, but it messes with me all the time. I'm constantly being tested. I'm constantly mad about stuff and elated. So my emotional intelligence is really what's been the biggest lesson for me in working on
Yeah, I get
doing
that
this.
sense from you because we have some we have some similarities, uh, in the losing grandparents and suffering, and
There you go.
I'm going into hospice music therapy
Oh,
um,
perfect. I
as
almost
a
did that.
as a career. Do you play any instruments?
Nope.
Well,
That's
you
why
could
I
probably
didn't
sing.
do it. Yeah, I can do that. I'm a
They'd make you
cheater.
learn. They'd make you learn a few chords and whatnot, but
They would.
yeah, just to carry a guitar around. But so it's really good to hear that you had kind of that support from, sounds like your mother especially, who also has abilities. So anyone out there who's, maybe, I don't want to use the term waking up too much, but if you're having these,
Yeah.
these sorts of experiences, and we live in a gaslighting society. Everywhere you look, people are going to tell you somehow you're the crazy one, you know. But
Right.
you know, you don't need anyone's validation because, like what we were talking about,
And
you
it'll come.
rebuild yourself. Yeah, it'll come, and you rebuild yourself from within. We've we're lucky in a bizarre way because we've been on the path that we're on. But
Yeah.
part of what I want to do is try to maybe connect with some people that are, kind of living in both realms, and maybe feel like they can't exactly uh, talk about it
Engage
with
with
anyone.
either.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. So we'll take a break here in maybe 5 minutes or so. We'll take a couple minute break here. Um, there's a lot we could talk about. I think after the break, maybe we'll start getting into some more of the solar flare stuff, and
Mhm.
maybe tie that into some astrology and spirituality some more. But do you have anything you want to say about any last minute thoughts about growing your psychic abilities, spiritual hygiene, some things that maybe you do on a daily basis that you could just kind of, elevator pitch?
Sure. I would say I became obsessed with activating my superpowers and healing my DNA so it expresses in its most divine, organic, natural, intended way right in the beginning, when I knew that I could command over my reality. And that was the biggest thing that I was able to learn, was that you're commanding as if you are the programmer. We have the intelligence to command with our voice. And it's even, it's biblical. in a way. The fact that we can produce sounds that are coded with instructions out into this thing that we're walking around in, it listens and it responds to you. And the more you are kind of aligned with that ownership, that you can command the reality to serve you as well as the best good of everyone. Especially if you throw in that caveat, that's the ones that mess with your ego a bit, because if it's the highest good for everyone, then the timing of everything is going to be shuffled around a bit usually. And so your ego has to be like really trusting that what you said is going to work out, instead of backtracking and then trying to do a plan B, or like running from your manifestation.
Real quick on
Sit.
exactly what you were just talking about. I had that kind of day yesterday, so
Okay.
I've been waiting on an internship for music therapy,
Okay.
and I heard yesterday that the director quit, so I have to basically start over from square one. So I was gonna go out to California for an internship, but
Man, I
yeah,
would say you just freelance as you are. Like, people are dying in every city all over, and they would love to hear some music. You know what I'm saying? Like,
for sure.
it is such a natural thing, I think, that your heart wants to do, to love this process and bring love into this part of the human experience as your specialty. Like, you've it's so, I would say, noble of you. And it's a universal thing, it doesn't matter who it's going to be.
But yeah, the time scale. So exactly what you're just saying, and I was
Yes.
I was doing a chakra activation, and literally the second I took my hands away from my head, I was just asking God, for a sign, and I got the phone call right afterwards, and you know, so that was a big ego testing day. But sorry to bring my ego into this.
We have to, like, your ego is what I love about you. You know what I'm saying? It's truly, I think, your person. It's who you are. And who you are is constantly learning. And that's the good part. I feel like that's the good part. Like, when I'm around people, it's the solar plexus that goes and like opens up and just shines. And I'm so happy and emotional. And I feel like it can't be bad. I feel like that's probably why they attack it so much. Like, you know what I'm saying? And it's like the sunlight. It's like your personality from the center of your being, like shining out. So I'm glad you got some feedback on that. But I feel like you're just, the guy's fired because he's just not as good as you. He couldn't be as good as you. So the universe was like, no, that can't be
Right.
it. You
Well, that's
you
very sweet.
shot right through it.
That's definitely a silver lining.
There's still problems, even in
Yeah.
therapeutics and stuff. They're still allowing themselves to be cornered into these weird rules that people know in their soul that is not the right thing to do. It's not the right way. Oh, but it has to be the way. It's like, tear down the hospitals. Like, the hospitals are a prison for a lot of people. Like,
Dead zones, metal boxes. I mean, I've heard stories of like surgeons, you know, seeing their bodies outside of time,
yeah,
but I don't
I
know if
bet.
you've ever heard of, or if you've listened to any of Dan Winter talk.
Mhm.
He talks about exactly that, how hospitals are like not a good place to die, pretty much.
No, it's terrible, which is awful to say too, because what do you do? Like, tell people, if you're dying, just don't go to the hospital. Just die in your bed at home or surrounded by your stuff and your loved ones. That's the best way. And nap out of your body instead of like literally being, what's the word? It's like, oh, it's like necromancy, like what they're doing to people in hospitals. It's like,
Yeah, and it's a selfish thing on the family members' parts who don't know how to grieve. They're
of
scared.
course, they're so scared.
Yeah.
So maybe we can stand outside the hospitals, being like, with like a sign, like, I know you're scared, but talk to us for 5 minutes before you go inside. I don't
Yeah.
know. Like, what
Can,
can we
can
do?
we can we make all the hospitals made of wood, like so our
Ooh,
souls can
nice.
travel through that organic material, so we can gain a charge to implode into that longitudinal field instead of these
Nice.
plastic and metal boxes with poisonous fluorescent lights that just
Oh, the
basically keep
lights.
our energy here for. who knows how long.
Yeah, I think that was one of the major things that I for sure had to pick up from the whole dying experience of my relative, because obviously as a child who was really getting just a crash course in the whole situation, I was, young. I was like 16, 7, 15, 16, 17 during that time. So a normal time for kind of a spiritual awakening in a person, because your pineal gland starting to activate, you become an adult. So it's very like there's many layers of being an adult that a child doesn't deal with. So it was intense, but yeah, don't want people tortured in the hospitals anymore or the hospices. She
Please.
suffered. She for sure suffered through, and she's a tough woman, and that was very cute. And she would have been like, "Oh, whatever." She probably just shrugged it off. But as her caring family member, I wouldn't have done that to her, and
Absolutely. And
not.
her energy goes beyond this dimension. And, we are so powerful. It's hard to imagine how powerful we are. And there is only
It
one true
is.
light. And let's take a short couple-minute break here. Um, I'll send you another invite, and then maybe we can talk a little bit about the beautiful sun and some astrology a little bit.
Okay.
And I'd also like to talk about your guardian training.
Yay. Okay.
Okay, see you in a few minutes.
Deal.